Kinds of stuff that I already have in my notes and stuff right there. It's already in the scripture. Where you don't have that translation. You didn't have some of those little things that really bring some light to it. But that's correct, because I was looking at the Hebrew and all the stuff on the back side of things. But with that, if you guys will stand up, we're going to pray. And we are going to get started and sing some worship songs. Father God, I thank you so much for this day. I thank you for every single person who's here today, Lord. I thank you for this church, Lord, that you blessed us with to worship in, to praise you, to be with one another, Lord, to hear your word and to pray, Lord, and just to have the sweet beauty of fellowship with one another as well. Lord, help us as we hear your word preached today. Help us as we sing your songs. Help it not to be something intellectual, Lord, that's just on the surface. Help it to be in the deepest parts of our minds and the deepest parts of our hearts. Help us, Lord, not to be distracted by the things going on in life or even by things going on right in the church as we're worshiping or singing, Lord. But help us to be able to focus totally on you. Help us to sing these words and mean them as we sing them, Lord. And help it to sit deep down in our heart and help it to all be done towards you and not ourselves and not just as something that we go through motions as, Lord. But let all these words from the hymns to the words of your scripture, the words of the preaching, help it to sink deep in our hearts, Lord. Help us to understand, help us to see, help us to know you more. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. Remain standing if you can.
Take our hymnals and go to 58. Like Buck said, the first Advent is coming up. It's actually in 2 weeks. So we will have, after this Sunday, one more week with regular songs, and we're going into Christmas.
And when my tests on Jesus and silver or gold, I'd rather be his and riches untold. I'd rather have Jesus than houses or lands. I'd rather be led by his nail-pierced hand than to be the king of a vast domain, all beheld in sin's track sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. I'd rather have Jesus than men's applause. I'd rather be faithful to this dear cause. I'd rather have Jesus than worldwide fame. I'd rather be true to his holy name than to be the king of a vast domain, all beheld in sin's track sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. It's fairer than lilies of rarest bloom. He's sweeter than honey from out the comb. He's all that my hungering spirit needs. I'd rather have Jesus and let him lead than to be the king of a vast domain, all beheld in sin's track sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today.
Amen. I'd rather do have Jesus. This world is crazy. All right, let's go to 126, 126. One of my husband's favorites.
Has held the oceans in his hands, who has numbered every grain of sand. Kings and nations tremble at his voice, all creation rises to rejoice. Behold our God, seated on his throne. Come, let us adore him. Behold our King, nothing can compare. Come, let us adore has given counsel to the Lord. Who can question any of his words? Who can teach the one who knows all things? Who can fathom all his wondrous deeds? Behold, our God, seated on his throne. Come, let us adore him. Behold, our King, nothing can compare. Come, let us adore him. Who has felt the nails upon his hands, bearing all the guilt of sinful man? God eternal, humble to the grave, Jesus Savior, risen now to reign. Behold, our God, seated on his throne. Come, let us adore him. Behold, our King, nothing can compare. Come, let us adore. Behold, our God, seated on his throne. Come, let us adore him. Behold, our King, nothing can compare. Come, let us adore him.
Amen. You may be seated.
All right, here we go. All right, I found a cool picture again. One I thought summed up what's going on here is a picture of a calendar. And think about it, we all got calendars. And you put stuff on your calendar of what you got to do on what day. And there's all these kind of things always on the calendar. There's so much we like to do in the calendar. I know for me, I would love to hunt all the time. You know, it's sad that I haven't been hunting for a little bit. Maybe that little bit's another person, still not a little bit. But I still feel like this time of season, usually I like to get out there all the time. I'm just so busy I can't. The things on my calendar. And there's other things on calendars. You know, we kind of get to learn to live as we get older, to be patient, to know, okay, it's coming on the calendar, it's not today, but it will be. But yet our calendars are so full, and it really gives us an absence of freedom. We want to do something, and we're not able to because we have all these things filled up. And truly, this is kind of the picture of the way this passage is. God's the one who's made the calendar for our lives, to made the seasons for our life, that's made the things that are going to be. Sad times, good times. It's all in God's hands. It's God that does everything. He is 100% in control. It really is an absence of freedom. As we've been going through this, we found out like the answer is not in the pleasures of life. We found out all these things as we've gone through Ecclesiastes. And here's like King Solomon searching out all of life. And he found in this passage there really is no freedom in life. People all say, well, I'm free. Well, how free are you really? You're really a limited freedom at best right there. And in the end, you die and you're gone and everything you did is gone right there. That's what it said before. Vanity is vanity, all is vanity. So it's really absence of freedom is what this passage grabs onto. There's a negative side and there's a good side, okay? That's why we're going past verse 8, verse 9. We're getting to some good side here too. So don't worry, don't be overwhelmed. And in this poem, it's like a poem. The motive of the changelessness and divine control is applied to the widest possible range of human activities. We shouldn't just think God's just in charge of when I die. God's just in charge of when I'm born. God's in charge of every single thing in our lives. 100% God has control. And I say poem, I wrote it in here so I don't forget, so we'll come upon it. But if you look at the way this Hebrew book, Ecclesiastes, was written from Solomon, there are 28 things mentioned with 14 pairs. And it brings you down to the number 7, all right? And what's 7? The number of completeness. So it's like God in this book, right? God the Holy Spirit writing through King Solomon uses this beauty of poetry, of numbers and things, and points out, that God is the one that has this complete. If everything in life, God's the one that has it completed. And there's something that I learned, I had to look up the definition, a merism, okay? There's another word for it too, merismus or something, but merism means the same thing. And it's merism means that you include all points in between. So if you use in your language, I searched high and low for my lost keys, okay? And you think, okay, what does that mean? That means he looked everywhere, high and low and everything in between. So the way we speak today, the way the Bible speaks today in this passage, is like a time of birth to a time to die, high and low and everything in between. God controls and God has. It talks about times of grief, the times of joy. It talks about all these things in this passage of life, and it means that merism isn't just like an idea. I read it from quite a few scholarly fellows. This is what this is showing. It's like God is in control of everything, 100% of the way, from the beginning to the end, and everything in between. And this is what this passage really pulls out. And we can see that God is always working his purposes out. It's not about our purposes, it's about God's purposes, and God's going to work these purposes out. I only have one scripture like this. It's outside the passage, I believe. This is it. Could have been more. All right, but we have a lot of verses, so I didn't put a whole lot more. But here is Proverbs 19:21. I think this is the one where people often cite this, but it's not really a proverb. It's a Jewish saying. Is man plans and God laughs. That's a Jewish proverb. It's not a biblical proverb, but here's a biblical proverb that is much like that one right here. Many thoughts are in man's heart, but it is the counsel of Yahweh that will stand. We may think all these things that are going to go on, but in the end, it's God that's going to have what goes on, even though we have all these plans. And you notice how it says Yahweh? That's my Bible version, the Legacy Standard Bible. I've got it now on digits. It's up and running. So many times, maybe as we preach now, if the word capital L-O-R-D is used in your text, it will be translated as Yahweh, which is very grammatically correct because it is the YHWH tetragrammation, the word that the Jews don't even use because it's the holy name of God. They just put G-D, and it's something I think that helps to bring out more picture in the text, okay? Every Jehovah's Witness I run into, I tell them about the Living Legacy Standard Bible, hoping maybe they'll bite, because that's what they say is messed up with our Bible, is we changed the name Jehovah. Well, I want to let them know, because they know Yahweh too is just like the name Jehovah. I'm like, hey, there's a Bible I'm reading right now that it's got God's name all throughout wherever it's supposed to be. But I don't think they'll like it, because there's times when it refers to Jesus Christ as Yahweh, and they sure don't want to hear that, that Jesus Christ is God Almighty as well. But here we see this. The total submission to God is really all we can do. With everything in life, all we can be is totally submitted in submission before God. We live consciously in time, but it's God that determines everything. We're aware right now of what we're thinking, what we're doing, what we're going to eat, where we're going to go, how we're going to dress, whatever it is. We're aware of that, but it's God that determines everything. The aim was to accept God's fixed season of the human calendar and not to fight against it. That's the aim of this passage, to accept God's fixed season of life and the calendar and not to fight against what God has ordained, what God has done. And think about this, an ironic thing that happened. I found this is JFK, the day that he got shot in the head and he was on that way to make a speech. Guess what he was going to use in his speech? Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. He was going there to say the exact same thing that happened to him, a time to be born and a time to die. Boom. His time to die came exactly before he even got to give that speech. But really, this is a powerful thing. If I was a little more technologically proficient, which I'm not because I use my phone to do a little face live time, so maybe some Facebook friends or somebody watching on Facebook may be able to see our sermon, I would play a song from you. And It's a guy named Pete Seeger from the 50s. Some of you guys know who it was, about time. And a whole bunch of people redid the song. One of the most famous was probably the Byrds in the 60s. I like the Byrds. I probably would have played the Byrds version right there if I had it for you. But no, it's okay. It's okay. But this is what I was thinking. Maybe later, think about playing that song by the Byrds in Time. Just Google Byrds in Time, and I bet it's for free on YouTube or something too. But they kind of grasp onto it. It's like a concept that's being grasped onto, and yet they don't grasp it all the way. Because to grasp it all the way is to realize that time belongs to God, that all things are in God's hands, and that we can be in peace, even though time, is moving. And I think other times, I could think of that song, time keeps on slipping into the future. Maybe that's Pink Floyd or something right there, right? But here, all these guys have made these songs about time. And it's because when you think about philosophically, when you just think about life, when you get done with your distractions of all the do that you have to do, and you're just sitting there in your quietness, and you're thinking about life, time is something that you may think about, and for those that don't know Christ, it can be very saddening. People can hit like midlife crises. They can be like, I wish more would have happened in my life by this time. I wish this, I wish that. And truly, the answer to all that kind of stuff, focus on Christ. Focus on the day you live in today. Be happy with what God has given you this day. Be content and just be obedient to Him and do everything you can to His glory to follow after Him. And things do matter. It is important that we follow God every day. The details do matter. But in the end, it's all God. It's all God through and through. The finished product looks magnificent. I read this one guy's passage, and I was going to use this myself about Buildingtons, but I knew my wife would get real mad. But you'll know as I say this passage. Is this guy's passage, he said, his little guy was little, and I loved Star Wars as a kid. If there's a new Star Wars movie, I'm going to go watch it, okay? I'm a Star Wars type of guy. And this guy bought a Millennium Falcon for his boy. And it was made out of Lego, and it was like 1,254 pieces, the Millennium Falcon. And he said, if you just want the people to look at the picture and try to put things together, it's never going to work in this situation. You got to very carefully follow all the instructions and all the details. And he said, in the end, you have this magnificent looking thing, Millennium Falcon. He said his wife had no interest in Star Wars, but even she could admire the Millennium Falcon, even though she didn't know the difference between that and another starship or something from Star Wars. But then what he pointed out, he said, but what people don't see when they see the finished product was the frustration me and my boy had, the lost or missing pieces that never got in there. And we were so frustrated and looking for everywhere. But yet they see the finished product. And truly that's like our lives with time. We go through our lives, and in the end, God is working a masterpiece in your life together. But we sure do know that there's frustrations, there's lost and missing pieces. I was going to say it like my wife, like another picture like IKEA. If you buy something from IKEA and you have to put it together, it's not a good sign when afterwards there's extra pieces left over, Or you realize you're missing something, so you just have to make something work like it can in order to get to the end. But a lot of people like some IKEA stuff and it looks pretty good, right? But that doesn't often happen with me, okay? Our stuff has got the pieces in it at the house, okay? For the most part. Worse is if you're working on your car and you're doing your brakes or something, you're like, oh, where do these bolts go? Or these little shims or, pieces or something, it's important that you get that, but think about the frustration. Think about that. If you guys have worked on brakes before, I can do brakes, but when I say that and people hear it, they're like, oh, this is great, buckle do it, be done 15 minutes. Well, I have had people come to me and I have helped them, and like 2 to 4 hours later, much frustration, bleeding knuckles, maybe something a little broken and then half fixed has happened or something, and I do get it done. But man, it's not that easy to get done. Maybe you're an easy person with brakes. I do my own brakes because I like to save the money and know that I did it myself. But it's not the easiest task. If someone ever does brakes for you, you should be very thankful to that person, because it's not as easy. It's what it looks. That's why they mark them up like 500%. You can buy the parts for $150, but they'll charge you like $600 to $800 or something if you go to the shop, because it can be frustrating. And that's how it is in our life, right? But the end product, it looks magnificent. Okay. Now we'll get started. There is an appointed time for everything. You see that word, everything, the Bible says. And there is a time for every matter under heaven. So we're not just talking the parts that we want to attribute to God or that we don't understand or something. We're talking every single thing. God is in control. I think that's the most beautiful thing of all things. Some people hate this. They hate this doctrine so bad they fight it. People don't like me because I'm such a big believer in this doctrine. Some folks think, that guy. They really do. That's sad to say. Maybe you guys don't know. Maybe you guys do know. Hopefully you guys like me. Even though I hate this doctrine so much. But it is so comforting to me to know that God the Master is in control. And no matter how bad I might mess things up or how far short I may fall, He's got it right there. By His grace and His power. And it's all in His timeline. And then we see a constant repetition of time. Think about our time. Think about past history time. Think about reading things. Think about some of these songs we sing. Some of these songs were written by guys, they've been long dead, long time ago, And yet we still get so much out of them, and we can kind of see, wow, they were just like us, in time, doing their thing, living their lives. And Solomon here shows the futility, the vanity of vanities, the trying to grasp the wind, of trying to catch life's hidden meaning and change life's destined course. And isn't this the truth? Imagine how unhappy people can be if they're always trying to find some hidden meaning to life and they never ever find it. And they're always trying to find some type of destiny that they never ever get to. That's a very sad thing that goes on. And it goes on all the time. And Solomon's showing in this passage that you're never going to get to the destiny that you want unless it's the destiny of Jesus Christ in heaven and eternity and everything. That's the destiny we should all be aiming for. And you're never going to find the secret meanings behind everything. And we can see that time is not set by man, but it is by God. We may set our clocks back an hour or moving forward an hour. Maybe some of you are like me. There's still clocks around that haven't been changed yet from a week ago or whenever this was. But you know what? The sun still rises when the sun rises. The sun still sets when the sun sets. The seasons still come as the seasons come. Man cannot set time. Only God sets the time. And this is something important to remember here. Now it says, a time to give birth and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. And think about this. A man does not choose his time to be born or his time to die. And I'd also add, a man doesn't choose his time to be saved. It's God that does the saving. Talking about being born again in John 3, and it's a pretty mysterious passage as you read it. Because as Nicodemus is asking Jesus about what is this born again, and he goes, it's like the wind. It's like the wind. And once again, you make think of Ecclesiastes, you can't grasp the wind, And yet, I do believe that Nicodemus did get saved by looking at the fruits of his action, taking care of Jesus' body in the end right there, going to get buried with Joseph of Arimathea. The time came right there, but yet these things are in God's hands of who's born when, who dies when. All this is in God's hands. We can't control it. We can't choose it, all right? You can try to have a kid. Sometimes it could take forever and you won't have a kid. Think about Abraham. 25 years he waited for a kid right there that was promised to him by God. And all these things are in God's hands. Other people don't want to have kids, and they have tons of kids, okay? And unfortunately, some people kill their kids. So that's a horrible thing right there. We tried to vote to get rid of that. At least Ohio didn't go as bad. And some other places went and stuff like that. But think about this. It's not something we choose. It's something that goes on. Imagine that poor baby gets aborted. It's not something they choose for sure. You can think about yourself. You don't want to die. That baby doesn't want to die right there. That's a sin on someone else's part. But we see that this poem puts flesh on the life of the human skeleton. So like the human skeleton, picture the life itself. This poem right here, this reality that God's in control, but in all these times, it puts the life on the skeleton. It puts the, if you didn't have a time to be born, a time to die, a time to have joy, a time to mourn, if you didn't have all these times, what would life be? It would just be an empty skeleton. It'd be like if I had in the church, if I was an anatomical guy, which I was a bit of a medical guy at one point in the Army and such. You still remember those things when you learn them. And I had a skeleton hanging. And it's just a skeleton. It doesn't move around. It doesn't do anything. We don't see skeletons walking down the road. We don't see them experiencing life. But all these things from God is what brings the life experience to all of us right there. And God is involved with all of these kind of things all the time. And we see here as well that we are relational beings. All these points that are going to be made are made like in a community. You know, it's not something that happens alone. A baby isn't born alone. A baby's born with a mom and a dad somewhere. You know, a person dies. Most of the time a person dies, there's people around the person that died. There's people that mourn the people who died. You know, when we talk about joy, when we talk about building, this is all in community. And we can see how God has made us into relational human beings. Every one of these points connect us to one another, okay? Which is good why we're a church. We're connecting with one another. I always think it's so sad when someone tells me how they're such a strong believer and they pray and such, but they don't go to church. And I'm like, oh, you are missing out. But I do say I'm so happy that you're a strong believer. I'm so happy that you pray. But I'm thinking you're so missing out that you don't come to the church. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build up. Now there's a Hebrew word, probably saying it wrong. I didn't listen to how it was said. Rasha. Okay, it's probably like Rasha or something. But Rasha is the word for murder. And that's what you find in the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not Rasha. Thou shalt not murder. There's a difference between killing and murder. I've always said killing's done out of necessity, okay? And people don't like this sometimes. They're all fully about peace. But the purpose is that God has told people to kill people through the Bible. Does God ever tell anyone to sin? Absolutely not. God doesn't ever tell anybody that they should sin. So we see there's definitely a different defined line between killing and murdering, okay? Abortions are murdering babies, okay? Going to war and killing someone else because they're fighting your country, that's not murder. That's done out of necessity. Bringing someone to the electric chair because they killed someone else, that's not murder. That's justice that's being fulfilled right there. And it's actually commanded by God in Genesis chapter 9 and in Romans 13. So we see there's a time to kill, there's a time to heal. And who does the healing? God does the healing. Even if some doctor is so smart. And let me tell you, there's some smart doctors. There's people I talk to every day where I work, they got a brand new knee, a brand new hip. Can you imagine pulling someone's knee or hip out and then putting the right stuff back in, that just the next day when they wake up, they can already walk around on this when a huge portion of their body is missing? All right? I saw a big giant man the other day with my boys' hockey stuff, one of the dads. I'm talking, he's big. He's really big. And he told me that he had a knee surgery and 5 weeks later he was golfing. And I thought, wow, you imagine a man that's that large and they took his knee away, put something fake in there, and he was golfing 5 weeks later? Talking about the wisdom. But where's that wisdom come from? From God. Because who made man? Who made the mind? Who made all things? God made it. And we can also see that it's always according to God's purpose. Whether it's killing, whether it's healing, it's in God's hand. It's in God's will. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. And we think we have all this control of our lives, but in reality, we don't. God does. And you think about it, with your joyful times in your life, with your sad times in your life, we think we can control all these things. We don't. I tell you, time changes. One of the things I learned, I think I'm out of this phase of my life, I'm in another one. There's people here that are well in phases way beyond me, and I love to glean your wisdom from you for sure. But one thing I learned is when I was a young person, like 20s and 30s young person, so I mean like you're a young man right now, Buck, but it all depends on your perspective where you're at. But I'm not in my 20s and 30s no more, but I talk to people too in their 20s and 30s, and I want to know their story and what's going on in their life, and they think, oh, it's nothing. There's nothing going on. I'm like, there's so much going on in your life right now, and it's so beautiful, and I want to hear about it because it's wonderful, and you have so much opportunity around you, and you see as you get older, some of your opportunity isn't quite the same anymore as it was when you were in your 20s or your 30s or something, you know. I hear about people all the time running marathons. You know, when I was a young guy, I did a half marathon once, and man, did it feel good to finish up that thing. But if I were to run a marathon right now, it might be my time to die. I don't know. So I'm not going to risk it, okay? Because my wife and my kids need me and such, all right? But I really enjoy making that long trek right there, you know? And those things are gone now. Some of those things, and it's not just about that, but there's all kinds of things in life. And I think about this, And we think we have all this control. When I talk to young people, 20s and 30s, a lot of them think they have all this control and all this time, because truly the reality of mortality doesn't usually set in when you're in your 20s or 30s. You think you're going to keep on going on. You think everything's going to be the same. You don't realize death is coming. Death is coming for all. Death is coming for you as well. And it doesn't really sit with you the same way. Just think about life insurance. How many times do you tell or saving money, you tell young people in their 20s, I never listened to this, but you tell young people in 20s, start putting money away in your 401k, start doing this, start doing that. Man, when you're 60, you have all this stuff. Whenever people told me that when I was in my 20s, I was like, ugh, that's a long ways off. I'm not going to sacrifice now for then. But then as you get older, you're like, oh man. You're like, now with my work, there's a little matching 6% thing. So I've got 10% of my money going there, so I can get the 6% thing, so I can have a little more money. But it sure is going to be less money than if I would have done this when I was 20. Right? And it's this things you have is you don't realize this mortality until you start to get older. In your 20s and 30s, you have all this stuff, and you don't realize, you think you have all this control over your life, and you don't. Really, God does. He's got the control of your life. He's the one working what works and what happens right here. And that's who we should be going to, we should be trusting. 2 Kings 19 to 25. Well, first I'll read the passage. A time to throw stones and a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to shun embracing. So, a time to throw stones. You think, what the heck is this talk about? Well, a lot of people think that. And there's different ideas. But one thing I found was interesting is 2 Kings chapter 3, verse 19 and 25. When Israel was to go to war against people, and they had a nice field or something that Israel wasn't going to use, and maybe the enemy was going to take back, they would throw stones all over it. Tons of stones. And how, if you're a farmer, you can't grow real well. You can't plow your land really well when there's stones all over it, It was kind of like a scorched earth practice of warfare that the Israelites did as they went across when they were commanded by God to do this scorched earth, like destroy everything, cut all the trees down, do all this kind of stuff. And truly, sometimes there's a time to do that. Sometimes there's a time to clean up that field. Dig all the rocks out of it so that you can plant again. If you got a lot of rocks in your yard, you know what I'm talking about. You hit them with your mower or something. Sometimes you got to walk around and pick up those rocks right there, so that way it doesn't keep going like this. But there's all these times in life, and this is what I talked about in the beginning of the poetry. There's 28 parts to this poem. There's 14 pairs, which come down to 7, which is a complete summary of the seasons of life. And think about the way God works the numbers like that. And think about this too. We are the ones who are writing the story of our lives right now, but we're not the main author, okay? You can decide what you're going to do with your life, but you're not the main author, The main author is the one that guides the whole book. You're the one, you're like the little tiny author. You're trying to do what you can. For sure, you should do everything that you can. Your story matters, and it is so very important. And God is in the details, but you're not the main author. God is the main author of your life, of all of life. A time to search and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away. And think about the reality of economics, okay? Just this last week, I don't have any stock in Apple right now, but I do think Apple stock does pretty good as I've watched it and played with it in the past before. It went down to like 130, now it's getting up to like 150 or something. It just bounces up and down, up and down. I bet another year or two it'll be 500, 600, 700 like it did the last time before it split down. I mean, it's just how things go. It's the reality of economics, okay? Things come, things get thrown away. You don't know how economics is going to be. Times may be good, times may be bad. Contrast is between the time and the loss and gain, okay? Because we have loss and we have gain as time goes on. And part of life is learning the appropriate times, okay? Talk about just the guy that tries to be good with his money. When it was $130 for an Apple share the other day, if I had some money, I should have bought some shares of Apple the other day. Now at $150, I made $20 a share, and it keeps going up. But you don't always know for sure, okay? But it's the appropriate times, and that's as we go through life, and we're supposed to get all this wisdom. As we get that wisdom, we learn appropriate times for appropriate things, all right? And we keep learning too. My wife always tells me I said something inappropriate, and I was like, oh, golly, you're right. Shouldn't have said it like this, shouldn't have said that. And I learn, okay, and I grow. But this is what we do. We go through life, and we learn this appropriate type of stuff. And there are appropriate times in life. There's a time to tear apart and a time to sew together. A time to be silent and a time to speak. And you think about a time to tear apart and sew together, it also makes you think about grief, as we hit a few passages before. And there is a time to be very much in your grief, and there's a time to heal and to move on from your grief. But as a chaplain, I know this very well. No time will that grief ever totally be gone. No time will those hurts and sores and pains ever be gone. I really like the picture that I learned with chaplaincy, as they said the doctors can heal the outside, but the chaplains are there for the inside pains. And it's the inside pains that are often the worst pains, because those are the ones that will never ever heal. Like when somebody tells you they lost a child or some horrible thing like this, it's always there forever. And that pain never goes away. Where, you can break your leg real bad. I broke my shoulder really bad a year ago. Look at this, man. Look at me. Good shape now, Not perfect. It's not as good as it was when it was born and made, but it sure is good. But yet, pains that go deep inside, like pains of loss and grief, they don't ever quite go away right there. But there is a time to move on, and a time to heal, and not to stay in the worst of times right there. But you do have to go through that. You can't just see somebody in their fresh grief and tell them that. That's not the right thing to do. You stay with them in their grief, but also you pray that as time goes on, that there is a time of healing and a time that they continue to move forward too. A time to tear apart and a time to sew back together again. And life must continue, okay? This is a weakness of mine. A time to be silent and a time to speak. I'm a talker. I know I'm a talker. All my life I've worked at not being such a talker. I guess as I mature more, I say more with less words, I hope so. But I still say a lot. But sometimes it's just time to be silent. There's both these times. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. So many people, they pray all the time for peace, which is a good thing for us to pray for. But we can know for sure by reading the Bible. If you read Revelation with us, there will be war to the end of time. There will never be a time on earth where people are not killing each other. There will never be a time in this world where that doesn't go on, okay? It's like the dissension and the trouble within the human heart, within our own selves right there. There will never be a time of pure peace, okay? There'll be times of a lot of peace, but there's still, like I said, the military, they have never been, I think, without people being deployed somewhere in the world. What they say, violent men ready to do violent things so that you can have peace and sleep in your bed here at night. And that is always going on. And the end of war conflict is not the supreme goal of life. There's a lot of hippie type people that they think it's just peace, peace. If we only had peace, everything would be fine. It wouldn't be fine, okay? War is inevitable, and peace isn't the end goal. The end goal of life is following Jesus Christ. That's the end goal of life. You can be all the hippie you want to be, but you know what? At the end, you're still going to die. In the end, you're still going to have all kinds of trouble and strife and things like this. And in the end, there's not going to be peace. There's still going to be war, no matter what. Because God says there's a time for war and there's a time for peace. All right? God sent people to war. If you read the Bible, you read the Old Testament, a lot of times He sends people to war. And there's also a time to love and a time to hate. And people don't like that either. They're like, you shouldn't hate anything as a Christian. But I think, once again, have you read the Psalms? Have you read the Psalms where he hates sin so badly? Have you read the Psalm where he hates his enemies so badly? Have you read the Psalms where he hates himself so badly with the sin and the things that are within himself right there? There is a place for hate as well, too. But our hate should be well placed, okay, and not misplaced. So actually, due to the sinful nature, we're probably all more prone to hate than we are to love. So we should be focusing more on the love side than focusing on the hate side. But we should realize that there are things to hate in this world and in this life. I hate that there's abortion. Okay, I absolutely hate it right there. And that's something that I hate. Okay, I wish it wasn't so. All right, here's something. Verse 9, what advantage is there to the worker from that in which he labors? This is a hard one right here, okay? Think about the worker. You spend your life working so hard, and it says, what's the advantage of it? What's the advantage of it in the end? And it says, because we are made in God's image, we can try to probe life's depths and have enough success at it to know that we have not done it well. All right? Isn't this the case? Isn't it the case with everything we do? You may try to do like your Millennium Falcon and build it the best you can, but you know in your heart there's some pieces missing in there. You know in your heart there's some stuff that's not quite perfect in there, okay? I can't tell you the amount of times I've built stuff, and I've been getting trouble. I've built stuff, and something has gone wrong. And I make it work the best that I can, but at the end I'm like, oh, it looks nice, but I know it's not the best. All right? I tell you, and I think we can all look at this as well too, that we think we do all this stuff with success, in the end we know that it could have been done better. And this is the most powerful sucker punch. What's a sucker punch? It's like somebody comes up and just punches you real hard. Okay, hopefully no one here ever been sucker punched, or if you did, hopefully you don't get sucker punched anymore. If you never have been, hopefully you never will be, okay? Things are changing like that. When I was a kid, everybody had been in a fight before. Now when I talk about getting your fighting stance, if I'm teaching something, they don't even know what I'm talking about. They're like, what? What's the fighting stance? And I'm like, you lean forward so if you get punched, you just don't fall over if you're just standing there like stiff. And people don't even know. And I guess that's a good thing right there. But here it would be like the most powerful sucker punch. Even if you're in your fighting stance, you get knocked out by a thing like this. It's because your whole life work and everything you've ever put your life into, it says, what's the advantage of it? Where does it lead in the end? If this is your end time goal, it doesn't go anywhere if this is all that it is. And what he points out is what you do gain in the end is nothing, because you're dead. And that's what it said before. We preached a few weeks ago. Between the wisest man or the biggest fool, in the end, what's the fate? The fate is exactly the same, 6 feet under. They both have the same fate. And this isn't to try to be so negative to crush you. This is to let you know if your hope is in anything besides Jesus Christ alone, it's not going nowhere. Okay? That's where our ultimate hope of all things has to be, in Jesus. That's the answer. I have seen the endeavor which God has given the sons of men with which to occupy themselves, to distract themselves, to do something with what God's given us. Part of our task is those commissioned to tend God's garden and to fill the earth with people who will worship Him. If you read Genesis 1:28 and 2:15, they are supposed to fill the earth, okay? And they're supposed to tend the garden of God. Our earth is the garden of God. And we're supposed to fill it with people who will do what? Will worship God. Will follow after Him in things. And yet, we wrestle with the how and the why of how life works. And we all do this. We all got to think about, why is it like this? And why is it like that? And we wrestle with it. And God gave us that. God gave us that thing as a human being, made in the image of Him, that we want to do something. We want to do good. We want to do something with what we have. We don't want to just sit there and do nothing. And it's part of the task God gave us. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in their heart, yet so that man will not find out the work with which God has done from the beginning even to the end. Isn't this a powerful verse? I've only remembered by heart this part that He's put eternity in your heart when I think of Ecclesiastes 3:11. But how much more life is set to the verse when you know the whole verse right here? And the whole verse is that God made everything beautiful in its time. Okay, so there's beauty in everything. And He's also set eternity in their heart, which is our hearts, so that man will not find out the work which God has done from the beginning even to the end. So even that, as we try to figure everything out, God made it so you're never going to be able to figure everything out. Okay, we talked about this in Bible study the other night as Revelation 20 went on. Why didn't God make this simpler so we could really know what the future will hold with millennial reign or whatever it's going to be? And we can see from verses like this, it's part of God's plan that you don't know everything, nor can you ever learn everything. You're never going to get to the bottom of it all. And this everything goes right back to the same word as what was used in the first verse that we preached. It's about opposites, okay? Everything is opposites. All these opposites God's made beautiful. God has everything. God has all the opposites. God has the good, the bad. He has everything. And it speaks of the divine activity in human lives. Solomon had a positive attitude toward God's sovereignty, as you can read this, okay? He knew God was sovereign all the way. As you read this, the book of Ecclesiastes, there's no way you're coming away with saying God's not the one who's in control. Man is definitely not the one who's in control. As you read through the book of Ecclesiastes, if man was in control, a lot of the works, different things would end up being really good, right? But he's realized that it doesn't work out that way, that it's all in God's hand. And he had a positive picture about it too, good attitude. God has urged us to know the future, but we have no capacity to do so. That eternity in our hearts, we want to know what the future is. We want to know what it holds. And eternity was not timelessness to the Old Testament saints. If you look at what the word eternity meant when they used it to the Old Testament saints, it didn't mean timelessness. It didn't mean like I'm going to a place where there is no time, okay? It meant time, all right? Eternity meant a long time, okay? Eternity meant thoughts and consciousness and all kinds of things is what eternity meant. And with the merism, the picture that we see from all the opposites and things like this, we see failure. In the end, God has made it that man can't find out the work in the end. We see failure for man on man's part of what God's picture is here, the way it's supposed to end up. Recognition that what we see is not all that there is. Every single human being, when you talk about God and eternity and God puts sense of eternity in their hearts, they know that this isn't all that there is, okay? They should have a sense of going on. Those 20 and 30-year-olds, for most of them, they don't ever think they're going to die, okay? They think they're always going to live. Sometimes some older folks think that too, and then it's super tragic for them when, man, death hits them hard in the face with a terrible diagnosis or terminal thing there, hits them right there. But it is so true that in the heart of man, they believe there's something more, and they believe they're going to keep on going on. And surely we will keep on going on, but not in this flesh. You know, our spirit and our soul are going to go on forever. I know that there is nothing better for them than to be glad and to do good in one's lifetime. So here we're hitting some positive stuff now. Okay, I told you we're going to hit some positive side. All right, nothing better in life than for you to be glad and to do good in your lifetime. Isn't that beautiful? This is Bible scriptures. Nothing better than for you to be glad and do good in your lifetime. And what's our task? Is to submit to God's determinations. But we don't do it lying down. Okay. If something bad's going down, you should try to fix that something bad, okay? Say if my plumbing went bad in my house, and that frustrates the daylights. I do little bits. I do little bits of everything. But let me tell you, my wife can tell me the frustration level that happens. She observes it. When I work on the car, when I work on something on the house, she says, I'm not such a nice guy because I get so frustrated. Hopefully, as you guys do life with me, if you're with me or you're helping me do something and I get that frustrated, don't think it's on you that I'm so frustrated. I just get so upset because I'm trying to do something and I get stressed out and that just, shakes me up, all right? It happened to me the other week. We went to a nice park in North Olmsted Falls and we walked around. It was beautiful. And Jason and Lily were there too. And I left my phone in the park. And when I was ready to come home and quickly jump into a tree to hunt a deer, what happened when I went to look for my phone to call the police to tell them I'm going to go out hunting? That's like the way the rules work in Strongsville. I didn't have my phone. And then my wife calls in. Who answers? A policeman answers my phone. Because some nice person found it in the park and drove it to the police station and turned it in. I was so mad because I wanted to use that half hour to go sit in the tree stand, enjoy nature, and maybe have a tasty treat at the end of it all. But I didn't get it. And I was so frustrated. But this doesn't mean that I didn't try to do something. I got up, I went to the police station, I got my phone, I thanked them for giving it to me, and said, you got some nice folks in your town that they turn my phone in and not steal it. And we don't take life lying down, but we know in the end, God's got it. We don't just give up with all the frustrations and the troubles we got and just lie down. Okay, we need to be about this story that God gave us. The times of pain are always balanced with the times of pleasure. When you think about this in your life, maybe when you're in an extreme time of pain, it's very hard to ever think of a time of pleasure. But maybe that's what you need to do when you're in the most time of pain. What's the psalmist do? What does the Bible always say? Remember the testimonies of the Lord. Remember what God has done before. Remember what God has done in your life. And that'll kind of ease the pain when you're in the worst pain. And when you're in the best of life right there, don't get so haughty and high up that you don't remember that there's times of trouble and things like that too. Okay? It keeps you balanced in life right here. We got to stay balanced like this. It says, moreover, that every man who eats and drinks and sees good in all his labor, it is the gift of God. Isn't that beautiful? And I think this every man is every man. This is the people that aren't even going to heaven one day. It's the gift of God for every single person. As they eat, as they drink, and they see good in what they've done, it's a gift from God to be able to do that. Isn't that good? Even though my IKEA thing may not be so perfect, it's still a gift for me to have a nice cabinet in my house, okay? There was an IKEA cabinet my wife doesn't know about, and I put it together a little bit off, and it's not like the other one, and she noticed it right away, but it was kind of too late because all those little nails and everything already in there, you kind of busted up trying to refix it like that. But it's still nice. It's still a gift. I still have something nice in my house that keeps our stuff right nice, But think about this. All these things are gifts, and we should enjoy them as a gift. We should receive life as God's gift and make the best of it. Shouldn't we make the best of what we got? We only got what we got. I always say when I talk to folks about the Army, it was just Veterans Day, so I got Army on my mind. Maybe you're like, you always have Army on your mind. Maybe in 10 more years I won't. It's been 10 years since I've been out. I don't know. But one thing I loved when I went in was the slogan, be all you can be. Because that's all you can ever do. You can only be what you can be. It's not about trying to be more than you can be. That'll just make you frustrated like crazy. Although you'd be surprised on what you can be. You just keep pressing, you don't give up, and you'd be surprised at what comes to be. But this is what we should do, and we should be satisfied, and we should realize it's the gift of God for what He's given us. And we should receive life as God's gift and make the best of it. The simple delights of food and drink and work come from His hand. They are tokens of His grace. Joy there will help to ease all the pain we find elsewhere. And I believe the book of Philippians was a time of serious misery for Paul in a prison cell. And yet it's the most joyful book out of all 13 books Paul ever wrote was the book of Philippians. And he found that joy because he looked to God in his most hardest times in his life. And he was just so full of joy when he kept Jesus as his number one focus. Literally, it is the gift of God to enjoy life. And think about it. Are you enjoying life today? If you don't think you are, then look at this verse. Let it sit in with you right here, okay? It's the gift of God that you could enjoy your life, If you go eat something or drink something or whatever you do, or you work and something good comes to your work, enjoy it. It's the gift of God. Let that sit in. Let that seep into you. I know that everything God does will be forever. There is nothing to add to it. There is nothing to take from it. God has so worked that men should fear Him. That's such an important part of the end. God has done all this for what purpose? That you should be afraid of God. That you should fear God. That you should have great respect toward God. Of all mankind should. Our responses are to trust Him with our whys and whens, okay? When we trust God, we're like, why God? When God? But we should be thankful for the what's and that ease our pain and spark our joy. And with the rest of creation, we should say yes to His ground rules for our existence. So that men should fear Him. Time is more than a calendar. It's a call to worship and obedience. So think about your busy calendars right there. Think about your overall picture, your theme. If there was a theme on top, like sometimes it's a deer. I'm not big on deers today. If there's like a deer calendar and all you see are deers, think about a calendar for God and all of it about worshiping and obeying God. That should be the calendar of your life. Your calendar of your life is about worshiping and obeying Him. We are small and frail, but God is not. Okay, I read one word. We are puny and frail when you think about it in the big picture, the way this passage lends you to look. But God is not, and He is to be feared. And this is the last verse. Okay, it's not the last slide, but it's the last verse. That which is has been already, and that which will be has already been.